everybody, and I hope everyone's doing well today. Welcome to the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Catalyst webinar for May. If you've not joined us before, our webinars run each month. There's a lunch and learn for anyone interested in learning more about industrial biotechnology. Our upcoming ones are advertised on the University of Manchester's events page and also on IBIC's website. And my colleague Jen will post some links in the chat later so you can have a look at what's coming up. I think our June webinar is advertised already. We'll talk more about that later, but you can check back to the events page if you want to register and join our future events. So for those who haven't met me before, my name is Sabina Hawthornthwaite. I'm the Programme Manager of IBIC, the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Catalyst. And our project is led by Professor Aileen Miller in the Manchester Institute of Biotechnology at Manchester. And we partner with Liverpool, Manchester Metropolitan, Salford and Liverpool John Moore universities. So we're what's called a place-based impact accelerator. We're funded by EPSRC, and we're creating an industrial biotechnology ecosystem across Greater Manchester and Liverpool to accelerate research out of the Northwest universities, working across industrial biotechnology industry sectors and creating impact for our region. So over the last couple of years, we've had quite a wide variety of speakers at our webinars and across our partnership. And today I'm really pleased to welcome Professor Philip Shapira, who is Professor of Innovation Management and Policy at the University of Manchester at Manchester's Institute of Innovation Research. And he also was the lead responsible research and innovation academic for the Future Biomanufacturing Research Hub. His research focuses on dynamics and governance of innovation, particularly AI and engineering biology, and he leads the Manchester Institute of Innovation Research's Emerging Technologies and Governance Group. So welcome, Phil. Phil's also joined by Dr. Adam McCarthy, who's a postdoc on the FBRH project, and he's also at the Manchester Institute of Innovation Research. And he's looking at how emerging technologies are governed in practice with a focus on responsibility and sustainability at national and international scales. So Phil and Adam are here today to talk about scaling with purpose. That's the title of their project, and looking at how biomanufacturing firms can balance sustainability, responsibility and commercialisation, looking at how companies are founded with a strong aim of sustainability and responsibility, but somehow how those ambitions can be tested as products move from lab to market. So at the end of the session, there'll be time for questions. Please feel free to add them to the chat as Phil and Adam are speaking, or raise your hand at the end, and we'll go from there. So over to you, Phil and Adam. Thank you very much. I will stop sharing now, hopefully.
Thanks very much, Sabina, and to IBIC for inviting Adam and myself, and pleased to engage with all the participants. So as you were talking, Sabina, and talking about IBIC's goals of commercializing biomanufacturing and industrial biotechnology in the Northwest with low carbon and societal well-being. Of course, these goals are, none of them are easy, but there's also a tension between them. And I think one of our roles has been to highlight those tensions, but also to try and find ways through which firms and intermediaries like IBIC can help to navigate through that. Next slide. Thanks. So just by way of introduction to us, so we are, I guess I and other colleagues such as Adam and Claire Holland, current PDRA, and a number of others who've been alumni of our group, are kind of the responsible research and innovation component. And we're an interdisciplinary team, many different backgrounds, including both the sciences and social sciences. And we've been working originally with SynBiochem, and the Future Biomanufacturing Research Hub, the Centre for Biodesign Engineering between Manchester, Imperial, and UCL, and various other projects to essentially to help the people in these projects and the companies associated with them to anticipate, prepare for, mitigate or mediate both the opportunities and the impacts of biotechnology technologies. And we're not direct business engagement. I guess our role is to be thinkers, to be provocators, but also we do engage. So we do research, we develop models, we develop various tools. We engage with policymakers using processes of responsible research and innovation, real-time assessment, looking at sustainability, looking at the issues of ethics, and trying to foster collaborative development. So just a few words about the group. Next slide. So what we want to focus on today is, I guess, really this challenge, the triple challenge in biomanufacturing. So there are biomanufacturing, promises to be an engine of transformation, and its goals are ones of replacing fossil inputs, fostering technological sovereignty, which I think has become really much more significant to kind of how can we generate the energy, the production, the recycling in green ways that don't mean that the UK is always relying on fragile supply chains of petroleum, which is a particularly poignant point now, but also addressing societal and global priorities, global challenges. But in trying to do this, I think, there are many issues, but we can kind of distill it down to three major challenges. The first one is commercialization. In most cases, biomanufacturing products are competing against existing products in the marketplace, petroleum-based, which are very well established. They may often have some subsidies and tax benefits associated with them. The customers are kind of used to them. There is this challenge of when you come in with a new biomanufacturing product, how do you get it to fit the market, to meet customer needs, to get customers attracted to it, to generate the revenue, the financing, ensure regulatory compliance. So those are the commercialization challenges that also intertwine because of the promises of biomanufacturing into those of sustainability. Are these products and processes really reducing emissions? What are their implications for resources and circularity, end of life? And then the third arm of this triple challenge is that of responsibility. Are we sure that these technologies are safe? Are they ethical? Are they societally beneficial? And for biomanufacturing to meet its promise, it really has to kind of move forward on all of these fronts. So the RRI group has been exploring how centres in the UK and elsewhere, and companies in the UK and elsewhere, are addressing this triple challenge. And there are three particular projects I'd like to talk about at the lab level, at the firm level, and at the network level. Maybe turn to the next slide, Adam. So this is the first project. This is something we've been working on at the lab level, which we call the Early Rapid Sustainability Assessment Tool. Why do we need this kind of a tool? If you look at the upper right-hand diagram, this basically kind of puts forward the dilemma. At the very early stages of thinking about new biomanufacturing products and beginning to develop them, we have a lot of ability to influence the way in which that product and its associated processes are designed and implemented. But our knowledge about their impacts, is relatively small. As we go through the process of R&D, translation, and scale up, we develop a lot more knowledge about the potential impacts and implications of a potential process or product. But as we move down this chain of technological development, we begin to get locked in, and our ability to change the product, to change the process, particularly, when we're kind of in the middle to later stages of development, becomes more difficult. So there are tools that help us think about these aspects, particularly things like life cycle analysis, sustainability analysis. But most of these existing tools are only helpful in the mid to late stages because they require lots of data and they're expensive. So what we've been working on and searching towards is how can we develop a very early stage tool where researchers and early stage innovators can anticipate and reflect on commercialization, sustainability, and responsibility before scale up locks in their trajectories. So this is kind of a tool for the early stages of development. So by implication, there's not full information, but we have to try and work with what we have. So we've developed this tool. It essentially has 3 dimensions to it. Look at which are kind of related to the life cycle, the dimensions of feedstock, the dimension of process, the dimension of product. And each of these 3 dimensions has a number of probes related to economic, societal, and environmental aspects. And the way we've implemented this tool is in a group process, if you like, the innovators or the proposers present this to either to external peer reviewers, although it can also be done internally, and create some open dialogue and get feedback on each element. And write down observations and comments, and then kind of come up with some signals. Green being it looks like this is positive, amber, there's some uncertainty, needs more attention, and red, there's a potential problem here that we're going to have to look at more carefully at this early stage, and maybe we can design some way around this particular problem. So this is not a scoring method. It's not cost-benefit analysis. It's basically a signaling process. The kind of questions that we ask, for example, under feedstock would be, how expensive is the process? Is it profitable from a social perspective? What processes or industries might this disrupt, and what would be the impact? And environmental, what are the environmental implications of using this feedstock? What would be the nature of any waste? How is it produced? In terms of process, economic questions relate to how costly is it to run? Can it be profitable? Societally, are there any intellectual property issues related to this? What industries would be disrupted? And environmental, what would be the pollution aspects? And then from a product perspective, is this product really going to be competitive in the market? How expensive is it? What would be the societal implications? How will consumers respond to this product? What will be the environmental implications of the product in use and at the end of use? So we go through this kind of scaling process through the traffic light, and we begin to get some signal as to where it looks to be okay, or where the project may have some issues that need some thinking. So this does not substitute for full life cycle analysis, but it can be a very useful kind of tool in the early stages. It is something that's available. It's just about to come out in a peer-reviewed publication, but there's already a preprint that we can make available to any people that are interested. I'll now turn it over to Adam, who's going to talk about the other two projects we'd like to draw to your attention. Over to you, Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. I guess now I want to turn over to what happens when firms actually begin scaling. So, we saw the process happening in the lab. What happens when, you take a piece of IP and turn it into a viable company? Essentially, we wanted to look at how the triple challenge interacts in day-to-day decisions as biomanufacturing firms scale. And just really importantly in this, we wanted to move beyond the kind of idea of simple trade-offs that like it's either, going to make it in the market, or it's going to be sustainable, or, it's going to be responsible. It is really kind of this iterative kind of approach, and marked by kind of tensions between these, and they're kind of navigated over time. So to do this, we used a qualitative study interviewing 15 actors involved in biomanufacturing. So we really wanted to target as well the decision makers, but also those involved, like on a day-to-day basis with developing the technologies. So yeah, where possible, we spoke to CEOs, and it was important to do this across different scales. So we looked at SMEs that were just starting out, medium-sized companies in biomanufacturing, but also some of those bigger ones that may not be like only a biomanufacturing firm, but they're using those technologies increasingly as part of their operations. So we really wanted to look at how these things change over time as firms scale as well. So within this, we wanted to look at when tensions become most visible, how they're distributed across organizations, and how firms try to navigate them over time, and with what consequence. One of the big findings is that the triple challenge becomes more difficult, or at least changes as firms scale. And we wanted to really look into how this happens. So just to call out some initial findings, we found that kind of meanings shift over time, like definitions of sustainability and responsibility may help to coordinate action, but they can be flexible and remain kind of unstable as firms grow. And just by the way, I won't read out all these quotes. Scale up does create friction. For example, early alignment, like you've got a really sustainable solution, may give way to pressures from kind of finance, customers, the realities of the supply chain. But interestingly, we also find the opposite, where companies or individuals within companies have an aim to kind of get to market first and then swap to a more sustainable feedstock, for example, or a more responsible practice later, once there is like a proof of concept, or a more sustainable funding source. We also find a kind of measurement effect. Phil talked about some of the issues with uncertainty and related to the early rapid assessment tool. But we found that what is kind of quantifiable gets prioritized. So, for example, methods to measure carbon dioxide production or reduction are quite well established, like life cycle analysis. Other things like responsibility are harder to measure, and therefore become easier to defer, or don't need to be demonstrated as part of compliance. There was also kind of understandable agency limits due to wider structures. firms want to act responsibly and sustainably, but markets, investors, regulation shape what is possible for them. So we really want to emphasize this kind of idea of also navigation, not solving. Firms use a range of strategies to balance these competing pressures over time. And kind of to make this paper more useful for practitioners and policymakers, we also identify some of these for we want to identify some of these for the community. So I just want to change my slide. Okay. Well, maybe before I go to this, then I'll go back. Before I go to that, then I will sort of outline some of those strategies. So we have kind of, as I said, the staging of what is focused on, like maybe the market is focused on first, and then you go back to sustainability or vice versa. You have the need to make like new standardized tools, for example. And another thing would be, deferral and getting support from the network. And that kind of brings me to the next, well, it's actually a set of papers, 2 papers in this, is about the network, the wider context around firms as they're trying to scale with the triple challenge. So the headline is that firms do not navigate the triple tension alone. The scaling depends on the wider innovation ecosystem, but so does responses to the challenges of sustainability and responsibility. In our work on biofoundries and innovation intermediaries more generally, we found that these organizations can play a really important role in supporting firms. But an important thing is that in these 2 papers, we thought it would be interesting that given this triple challenge, we might actually need to reconceptualize the traditional role of intermediaries in meeting these complex and multifaceted challenges. And so we really wanted to zoom in on this. And how we did this, we kind of conceptualized 3 kind of traditional roles, or 3 roles of intermediaries that build upon one another. So we have the traditional role of intermediaries, which is to engage in translation, traditional lab to market, technical expertise, and business support. We found as well that increasingly intermediaries are taking on this kind of networking role, being embedded in the kind of regional innovation system, for example, linking firms with others, building local support, especially with local policy as well, and partnerships there. And I'm sure you can all think of some examples in your kind of local context, or indeed some that you might be engaging with. But then we started talking to intermediaries again. So this is also supported by about 20 interviews, or well, 20 plus actually. And we were asking them how they might embed this triple challenge. And we saw that there is a potential for a new role, intermediary 3.0, where they bring together the traditional intermediary 1 roles, 2, but also to bring in some of the expertise, support, data, networks, and policy connections that might help firms to engage with the triple challenge. And there's 2 kind of really nice quotes there that demonstrate this. I really think that it's important to note that, firms won't have to do this stuff from scratch, and there is support out there, but how do we bring that together to effectively meet the challenges, the grand challenges facing our society? So just to kind of bring this together, I think that well, I just want to first I'll highlight the table at the bottom there. So to summarize, at the lab stage, impacts need to be anticipated before lock-in, and to support that, we can create tools to engage with that. At the firm level, they have to navigate these challenges in sometimes like difficult ways with with tensions embedded within them, and the support there would be needed. The support needed there would be, flexibility, adaptability, and support from the wider network. And when you look at the network, intermediaries themselves take on new roles. Support here could be, policy support and funding as well to support them in doing this and really kind of taking on that challenge. And the headline then is that the triple challenge seems to be structural to emerging biomanufacturing, and we can't just rely on firms or scientists in the lab doing the right thing. These pathways need to be shaped collectively across the innovation ecosystem, and this requires coordinated support and action. So obviously we want to hear from you. Some key kind of questions that we have for reflection include who should help these firms navigate these tensions and at what stage? How can engagement and assessment capacity be organized? When should firms engage publics, for example, during scale up? And which regulations might hinder or better support sustainability choices? And what changes could help in this space? As Phil mentioned at the start, we're quite also engaged with UKRI and for example DSIT on these kind of issues. So having that connection between the community and the policy is we see that as kind of also an important role for us. Finally, if you're interested to read anything more about these, this is based on, it's quite a number of papers now. We've been working on this for some time, so feel free to have a look, and we look forward to any questions or any discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adam and Phil. So it's been really interesting to hear about the RRI Group's take on the triple challenge and the tools you've developed to test, for example, sustainable and responsible innovation, and the surveys that you're looking at. I wonder if anyone in the audience now wants to sort of have a go at, if you want to go back to your previous slide, maybe have a discussion on the key questions for reflection. Not seen any hands up as yet, but please feel free to post in the chat, or you can come off mute and raise your hand if you wish.
Sabina, maybe I'll ask you a question just to get the discussion going. So looking at from the view of IBIC, and your kind of day-to-day engagement with companies in the Northwest and trying to integrate between researchers and companies, how do you see this challenge? What are some of the methods you've used to kind of address it?
So I think from the point of view looking at this slide, for example, we're kind of looking at the scale, the early stage tools to help move from lab to firm. So we're bridging that gap with our funding, for example, and our networking events and community building. We don't necessarily help with sustainability, but we are trying to encourage responsible research and innovation through the projects that we fund. We also link with other sort of lobbying bodies in the UK. We work with BBIA and so on to try and generate a voice, for example, to look at how government might shape better, I don't know, an example, tax breaks for people who are trying to innovate more responsibly and use non-fossil fuel-based things, and there doesn't seem to be a mechanism for that. So I think that's how we can help shape the ecosystem that way. I thought I saw Neil on the call. I don't know if he wants to come. Oh, he's put his hand up. Excellent. Hi, Neil.
There you go. I'll jump in.
That's perfect
Yeah,
timing.
interesting. I remember the early days of the traffic light scheme, so it's good to see how that's kind of developed into something. I was kind of interested. Obviously, this is kind of very sort of opinion and feeling based, and I guess a big driver and challenge is ultimately economics. Yeah, as you pointed about, that the bottom line is really the thing that counts. Yeah, the shareholders and CEOs are not going to be beholden too much. Obviously, there's corporate commitments around these things to do the right thing, to be perceived to do the right thing. But one thing I thought that was maybe absent, or maybe you could comment on, was sort of the role of regulation. I know you talked about policy, but I guess I was thinking about sort of forward regulation, how kind of EPR vehicles and the potential for better carbon accounting mechanisms would potentially remove some of these tensions, I guess you should call them, because then it becomes sort of much more factual and hard based that they have to comply, or that they can communicate better to their customers that the product that has renewability in it, because they can have trusted metrics. So it's just kind of interested in that sort of regulatory and I guess standard space, if you've got opinions on that.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Thanks for your question, and good to see you online. I mean, regulation is clearly important, and and it's a kind of a complex thing, and there are like hundreds of regulations and many different regulatory bodies. And of course, we have UK regulation, and then EU and US and other countries. Hard regulation, but there's also like the soft, kind of a lot of soft regulation, I think, in this, in terms of thinking about supply chain and fair labor standards, etc., that kind of come into play. So, it's a really important area. On the one hand, regulation, typically lags technological progress.
Sure.
So things are kind of emerging, and particularly in the engineering and synthetic biology domain, things that could be done. And often regulation is unclear as to whether it should or shouldn't be done. And there's that kind of uncertainty until the regulatory process kind of catches up. I think we have this, maybe in this kind of debates about the UK's position vis-a-vis the EU. I mean, one of the benefits of moving away from EU regulation was to enable areas like synthetic biology and engineering biology perhaps to have more flexibility. But now I think there's a level of uncertainty kind of cast upon that as the UK now tries to kind of get back in again and make relationships with the EU. And that this would seem like one that would go pretty quickly in terms of all the trade-offs that have to be made. So I guess I'm saying this just to say that there's this kind of compounding of uncertainty about what the regulatory position is, which I think makes any company that wants to invest, it adds uncertainty. So I think knowing whether it's going to be one thing or the other thing is always helpful, but having uncertainty becomes rather difficult. The other side, though, is I think that government, can play a very positive role, in kind of pulling, engineering biology and biomanufactured products into the market. So in terms of things like carbon accounting, tax policy, demand innovation, there's a very positive role. And I think the challenge for the UK, although we often talk about this, and kind of having a kind of demand-driven regulatory environment, in practice, it's kind of very difficult to implement and kind of, again, gets lost between the various wheels of government. But I think it's something that is still to be worked on. Adam, I think you wanted to come in. Yeah.
We've got Adam's hand up. We'll let Adam come in, and then we've a question from Jesse in the chat. So we'll come to that after Adam's.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks for your question, Neil. That's it's definitely something that came up. I can just reflect on one of our interviews for the the second case about, and it's good that you mentioned carbon as well, because sometimes, or in the carbon space, it's not just regulation but also standards, which you mentioned too, of how carbon taken out of the atmosphere is measured is often based on what do you call it, like reforestation or things like that, and not actually suited to like a biomanufacturing solution, which might be different. So in one way it can give really clear guidance on what needs to be done, but the guidance might not be suited to the actual application. So you need to somehow the regulation needs to match the application. So yeah, there's two sides to that. The other thing I'm going to mention is things like the Nagoya Protocol and benefit sharing applications, which I know that's like a very tough piece of regulation for the community, but that is just something that could, I don't know, that those things need to be kind of worked out. For example, with the early rapid assessment tool, one could have a look whether this is going to cause kind of benefit sharing triggers, and yeah, I think as well the intermediaries could play a role in that, of bringing together that relevant expertise, because some scientists may not know that they've got obligations under the Nagoya Protocol when they're starting to translate their products. So bringing in lawyers and people is another dimension that could be considered. But yeah, thanks for your question.
Thanks both.
Okay, thanks, Adam. So from Jessie Sweetman, we have, she said, thanks for an interesting presentation. I work in the Business Interaction Unit at BBSRC at UCRI. Where do you see the opportunities for public funders of collaborative pre-competitive research, such as BBSRC, to support sustainable scaling in biomanufacturing?
Well, a few thoughts from my end, Jesse. Thanks for the question. I guess ideally, I would hope that UKRI could be more consistent and long term in its funding. I think for maybe more than 10 or 15 years, there has been a program to support engineering biology from UKRI, which is good. It's got global recognition, but it's often kind of chopping and changing. Centers get funded here, then they don't. Their funding ends, and they get somewhere else. So I think attempting to be strategic and longer term and investment is really critical. I mean, the scale of investment is also a kind of a question. And if you compared what the UK invests with perhaps what the size of typical US or Chinese centers, we also need to think about that. Other aspects would be, is there a need to develop more scale-up facilities, facilities where companies can more easily, startup companies come in and, pilot test and do pilot manufacturing production in facilities and kind of get that leveraging up. Again, you see this in Biomade in the US. I don't see this to quite the level in the UK situation. Another area, this one is not that costly, but it's important, is continual attention to embedding sustainability and responsibility in funded projects. And my experience has been, if it's not emphasized by BBSRC or EPSRC, it kind of tends to get overlooked. And so that's something that I think that's continually helpful to begin to do that.
Thanks,
Adam,
Phil.
I don't know if you have
I
any additional thoughts or.
was going to say, does Jessie want to respond to that at all?
Okay, well, Jessie, yeah.
Don't know.
I just wanted to say thank you for a thoughtful response. I always make sure to feed back this kind of information to my team, so it's really helpful.
I think I would also say, I think it's true that UCRI are looking to develop more specific, policy-specific questions in their funding applications as well. I think I've read about that recently, to ensure that the policy aspects such as responsible or environmental, sustainable aspects are considered in the application stage of their funding. On infrastructure, Phil, I think also BBSRC recently had a pilot that was trying to bring together people to look at UK infrastructure, and I think that work is ongoing at the moment. I don't know if Jessie wants to comment there.
That's not something that I've worked on directly, so I can't comment, but I am happy to take questions offline.
Yeah, I think it was called the Engineering Biology Strategic Infrastructure Pilot, and it brought together a few experts from across the UK who were going to, I think, submit a proposal to BBSRC or DSIT, I think, to look at that in the wider context. Anyway, any more questions before we move on? In that case, can I ask
Sabina,
you?
I could just also respond to Jess's question. If we have time, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got plenty of time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's actually quite a short response, but we know that like UKRI, BBSRC have let's say like have things in grant applications, for example, that are about responsible innovation. But when engaging with people, we realize that some people find these to be kind of box ticking exercises, and that was also part of the logic for the early rapid assessment tool, to make something that was actually practical and useful for those that are engaging with the tech or like developing the technologies. And obviously we do debate that in the paper a little bit, but in answer to your question, what can you do to support? It would be to like support, develop, recognize like the value of like practical tools for considering these things beyond box ticking exercises, because no one likes those. Thanks,
Adam, that's really helpful.
Sorry, one more thing is that if you want to follow up with that, or members of your team would like to talk more about this, we would be happy to engage. So thanks.
I wonder, Adam, if you want to put yours and Phil's, or a way of contacting yourself and Phil into the chat, then we can. Yeah. Okay. And
yeah, our emails are down there by the asterisk.
Oh yeah. Okay. I think perhaps the IBIC team can share that information post webinar. Can I take over the slide decks now? Is that okay, Adam? So just to wrap up in a couple of minutes. We've got our next webinar coming up in June, on the 18th of June, where we'll be joined by Dr. Becky Jones-Phillips and Professor Jonathan Ball from Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. And they're going to be talking about the BRIGHT programme, which is powering Liverpool's biologics future. They're covering how they can identify and tackle barriers to effective commercialisation, which addresses the shortage of local biomanufacturing facilities and building scale-up capability within the Liverpool City region, which I think is appropriate to the conversation we've just had. And they also want to ensure that their biologics assets are developed, in Liverpool can be commercialised locally as well. So it might be an interesting one for the more people to attend, Phil. And as I mentioned earlier, the links to register, I think if you scan the QR code, it should take you to our events page. I'd also like to remind you that IBIC has several funding streams for those on the chat who are interested in trying to either commercialise their research or build collaborative knowledge exchange activity with industry. We've got partnership development, proof of concepts, secondments exchanges for knowledge exchange. We've got commercial development funds to help you sort of look at your market capability for your commercial ideas. And we've also got funds for building networks in the industrial biotechnology subsector, up to 5k per event. So if you're interested, contact the team, ibic@manchester.ac.uk or ibic.ac.uk is our website. The next funding cutoff is in June, 11th of June, another one in September and another in December this year. And we may have one more in 2027 early on, but still to be confirmed. Couple of things that are coming up. We're going to be running, for those who are interested in sort of commercialing their research, we're going to be running in conjunction with Innovate UK, we're going to be running an iCure discovery programme. This is being launched in May. I think some emails have already gone out to our IBIC community, and the closing date for applications is in July, and we'll be running starting in September, finishing with an options roundabout event in person in November at Sister in Manchester. We're also planning a workshop with BBIA in September, and we are also starting to plan our 2027 conference, which will be held in Manchester on the 14th and 15th of June next year. So all exciting things coming up. Please engage and connect and register for these things if it interests you. And I just want to finish off by saying another big thank you to Phil and to Adam for their time to come and talk to us today, for sharing their insights, their knowledge on scaling biotech sustainably and responsibly, whilst also considering the economic commercial aspects. And just to thank you all as well for joining the call today. So hope to see you in our June webinar or at one of our future events. Many thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Sabina.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.